If you had looked at my life from the outside, you would have thought I had everything figured out. At 34, I had the kind of life people post about. A beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. White walls, soft lighting, carefully chosen furniture that matched perfectly but somehow never felt lived in. A job that paid well enough for weekend getaways and online shopping sprees that arrived in neat brown boxes on my doorstep. I had friends. I had plans. I had a life that looked full. But that's the thing about appearances. They don't tell you what it feels like when the door closes at night. They don't show you the silence. And they definitely don't show you what it feels like to sit in the middle of your own life and feel absolutely nothing. The night everything changed didn't start like anything special. It was a Thursday. Work had been exhausting in the usual way, mails, meetings, conversations that sounded important but felt meaningless. I came home, kicked off my heels by the door, and dropped my bag onto the kitchen counter like I always did. I remember the sound it made, louder than it should have been, like the house was too quiet to absorb it. I turned on the lights. Every room lit up instantly, warm, inviting, perfect, and completely empty. I don't know why that word hit me so hard that night. Empty. I had walked into this house 100 times before, but something about that evening, something shifted. I opened the fridge. There was food. Organized, fresh, perfectly fine. I closed it without taking anything. I walked into the living room. The couch looked untouched, pillows arranged like a magazine cover, the TV remote sitting exactly where I had left it that morning. Everything was exactly as it should be. So why did it feel so wrong? I sat down slowly, the kind of slow where you don't even realize you're tired until your body gives in. The TV flickered on, filling the room with noise from a show we'd watched a dozen times. But it didn't land. The jokes passed right through me. The laughter felt distant, like it belonged to another life, another person. After a few minutes, I muted it, and that's when I heard it. Nothing, no background noise, no distractions, no voices, just silence, heavy, thick, uncomfortable silence. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't run from it. Most nights I would scroll endlessly on my phone, call someone, turn the volume up, do anything to fill that space. But not that night. That night I just sat there. Listening, feeling, existing in something I had spent years avoiding. And it hit me, not like a loud crash, not like a dramatic breakdown, but like a quiet truth that had been waiting patiently for me to finally stop and notice it. I'm not okay. The words didn't come out loud. They didn't need to. I felt them, deep in my chest. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I don't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe I needed to see something real. The light was bright. I looked at myself in the mirror. And for a moment I didn't recognize the person staring back. She looked fine. Hair done. Makeup still intact. Clothes still neat. But her eyes looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes. The kind that comes from carrying something for too long without knowing how to put it down. I leaned closer, studied my reflection like I was searching for answers hidden somewhere in my own face. And that's when it happened. The moment. The one that changes everything. I feel nothing. I whispered it this time. Out loud. And hearing it made it real. Not sad, not angry, not overwhelmed, just empty, like everything inside me had slowly drained out over time, and I hadn't even noticed. I sank down onto the cold bathroom floor, back against the cabinet, hands resting in my lap, and I tried to figure out how I got there. Because it didn't happen overnight. It never does. Emptiness isn't sudden. It's built, quietly, piece by piece, chose by chose, moment by moment. I thought back to my 20s. To the version of me who believed life would eventually click, who thought happiness was just one promotion away, one relationship away, one big moment away. I chased everything, success, love, approval, and for a while it worked, or at least it looked like it did. I climbed the ladder, got the job, moved into the house, built the life I thought I was supposed to want. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself if it actually made me happy, because that's the dangerous part. You get so busy building a life, you forget to check if you actually want to live in it. The tears didn't come right away. That surprised me. I thought a realization like that would break me. But it didn't. It just sat there, heavy, unmovable. True, hours passed. I don't even know how many. The house stayed quiet. The world outside kept moving. Cars passed. Neighbors lived their lives. And I sat on that bathroom floor, meeting myself for the first time in years. Around midnight, I finally stood up. My legs were stiff. My body felt heavier than before. But something inside me had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but acknowledged. And that matters more than people realize. I walked back into the living room. The TV was still on, the lights still glowing, everything still perfect. But now I could see it clearly. It wasn't a life, it was a performance. And I had been playing the role for so long I forgot who I was underneath it. That night, I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't make a plan. I didn't promise myself change. I just went to bed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't distract myself to sleep. I just lay there, in the quiet, in the truth, because sometimes the most important moment of your life is the one where you finally stop pretending. The strange thing about that night wasn't the realization. It was how long it had taken me to get there. Because when I really started thinking about it, the emptiness hadn't just appeared. It had been growing, quietly, patiently, for years. I didn't wake up one morning and suddenly feel lost. I built my way there, one decision at a time, one compromise at a time, one this is fine at a time. In my early 20s, I was different, louder, brighter, full of opinions, dreams, and this unshakable belief that life was going to be something extraordinary. I remember sitting on the floor of my college apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes and notebooks filled with plans. I'm not going to settle, I used to say. I want more than just average. My best friend at the time, Jenna, would laugh. Everyone says that, she'd reply. Yeah, I'd say, grinning, but I actually mean it. Back then, I believed that. I believed I would build a life that felt as good on the inside as it looked on the outside. After graduation, reality came in fast. Not in a dramatic way, just gradually, like a slow shift you don't notice until you're already in it. I got my first job. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Then I got a better job. Then a better one. Each step felt like progress. Like I was moving forward. Like I was becoming someone. And in a way I was, but not the way I had imagined. Work became everything. Not because I loved it, but because it gave me something clear. Goals, structure, validation. You do well, you get praised. You work harder, you get promoted. It was simple, predictable, safe, and I leaned into that. Hard. Long hours turned into longer weeks. Late nights became normal. Weekends became optional. I told myself it was temporary. Just for now, I'd say. Once I get to the next level, I'll slow down. But there's always a next level. Always another goal. Another reason to keep going. Another excuse not to stop. Somewhere in that process I stopped checking in with myself. I stopped asking, am I happy? Because I was too busy asking, am I successful? And those two questions, they're not the same. Relationships didn't escape that pattern either. I dated. Of course I did. People came into my life at the right times or what I thought were the right times. At first, it always felt exciting. New conversations, late night calls, the kind of connection that makes you feel seen. For a moment, there was one relationship in particular. His name was Mark. We met at work. Of course we did. That's where I spent most of my life anyway. He was charming in an effortless way. Confident but not arrogant. The kind of man who knew how to say the right things at the right time. And I fell for it, or maybe I fell for the idea of it. At first, everything felt easy. We'd grab coffee before work, stay late just to talk, find reasons to be around each other. It felt like balance. Like maybe I could have bought a career in something real, something meaningful. But slowly things shifted. Not in a way you can point to. Not in a way you can explain clearly. Just subtly, conversations became shorter. Time together became less frequent. Excuses started to appear. I've been busy. I've got a lot going on. I just need some space. And I understood. Because I was busy too. I had a lot going on too. I needed space too. That's the thing about two people who are both running from themselves. They don't collide. They drift. I remember one night, sitting across from him at dinner. We were at a nice restaurant. Soft lighting. Good food. Everything perfect. And yet something felt off. He was talking. I was listening. But I wasn't really hearing him. Because I could feel it. That quiet distance. That invisible wall. Are you even here? He asked suddenly. I blinked. Yeah, of course, I said quickly. But he just looked at me. And for a moment, I wondered the same thing. Was I there? Or was I just going through the motions again? We didn't last much longer after that. There wasn't a big fight. No dramatic ending. Just a quiet understanding that whatever was there wasn't enough. When it ended, I told myself I was fine. I always told myself I was fine. I went back to work, back to routine, back to the version of my life that didn't ask too many questions. But something changed after that. Not in a loud way. Not in a way anyone else noticed. But inside, I started closing off. I stopped expecting too much from people. Stopped opening up fully. Stopped believing that connection would actually last. It felt easier that way. Safer. Less risk. Less disappointment. And little by little, that safety started to cost me something. I filled my life with distractions. Social events. Dinners. Weekend trips. Scrolling. Shopping. No's. Always no's. Because silence was dangerous. Silence made you feel things. And I wasn't ready to feel. There were moments though, small ones, that slipped through, like driving home, late at night, no music, just the sound of the road, and a sudden thought, is this all there is? Or standing in a crowded room, laughing at something someone said. and realizing I don't feel anything. But I ignored those moments, pushed them down, covered them up, because facing them would mean facing something bigger, something I wasn't ready for. So I kept going, building, achieving, performing, until one day, I looked around at the life I had created and realized it didn't feel like mine. That's the part no one talks about. How you can do everything right, follow the plan, check all the boxes, and still end up somewhere that doesn't feel like home. By the time I was 34, I had everything I once wanted. The career, the house, the independence, the image. But somewhere along the way, I had lost something far more important. Myself. And the worst part, I didn't even know when it happened. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. Every time I ignored my feelings. Every time I chose comfort over truth. Every time I said I'm fine when I wasn't. Until eventually, I'm fine became my reality. Not because it was true, but because I stopped questioning it. So when I sat on that bathroom floor that night and whispered, I feel nothing, it wasn't sudden. It wasn't random. It was the result of years of slowly disconnecting from myself. And for the first time, I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. After that night on the bathroom floor, I told myself something had to change. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Not in the kind of way people post about. Just quietly, honestly, I told myself I would start paying attention to how I felt, to what I needed, to the parts of my life I had been ignoring. But here's the truth no one tells you about change. Awareness doesn't fix anything. It just makes everything harder to ignore. The days that followed were strange. Nothing outside my life had changed. I still went to work, still answered emails, still smiled in meetings, still said I'm good, how are you, when people asked. But inside, everything felt different. It was like someone had turned the volume up on my thoughts. Every interaction felt louder. Every silence felt heavier. Every distraction felt thinner. I started noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The way people talked without really listening. The way conversations stayed on the surface. The way I responded automatically without actually feeling anything behind it. One afternoon at work, I was sitting in a meeting. Same conference room. Same people. Same type of conversation. But this time I couldn't stay on autopilot. I looked around the table. Everyone was talking, nodding, typing, presenting. And suddenly, I felt completely disconnected. It hit me so fast I almost couldn't breathe. What am I doing here? Not just in that meeting. In my life. My chest tightened. My hands felt cold. I stared at my laptop screen, pretending to read something, but I couldn't focus. Because all I could feel was that same emptiness. But louder now. More present. More real. I'm going to step out for a second, I said quietly. No one questioned it. Why would they? I was always reliable. Always composed. I walked down the hallway, trying to keep my breathing steady. But it wasn't working. Each step felt heavier. Like I was carrying something I couldn't put down. I pushed open the door to the stairwell. It was quiet. Empty. Exactly what I needed. Or so I thought. The moment the door closed behind me, everything I had been holding in started to rise. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, tried to breathe. But instead of calming down, I felt it. Everything. The years of pushing things aside. The loneliness I never acknowledged. The exhaustion I never admitted. The emptiness I had finally named. It all came rushing in at once. My chest tightened even more. Tears filled my eyes. And before I could stop it, I slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor. And that's when I broke. Not quietly this time. Not controlled. Not composed. I cry. Really cry. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep. The kind you don't plan. The kind that doesn't care where you are or who might hear you. I covered my face with my hands, trying to muffle the sound. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered in that moment except the release. I don't know what's wrong with me. The words came out between breaths. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am anymore. There was no one there to hear it. And somehow that made it easier. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Maybe longer. Time didn't feel real. Eventually, the crying slowed. My breathing steadied. But the feeling didn't go away. Because that's the thing about breaking. It doesn't fix anything. It just reveals what's been there all along. I wiped my face, stood up slowly, looked at myself in the small reflective window of the stairwell door. My eyes were red. My makeup slightly smudged. But for the first time, I didn't try to fix it immediately. Because something inside me had shifted. Again, not healed, not resolved, but honest. I went back to the meeting, sat down, picked up where I left off, because life doesn't pause just because you're falling apart. But this time, I wasn't pretending everything was fine. I was just aware that it wasn't. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. The thought of walking back into that silent house felt heavy. So I drove. No destination, no plan. Just driving. The sun was setting. The sky turning soft shades of orange and pink. The kind of view people take pictures of. The kind of moment that's supposed to feel peaceful. But all I felt was distance, like I was watching my life from the outside. I ended up pulling into a parking lot near a small park. I didn't even remember deciding to stop. I got out of the car, walked slowly toward a bench, sat down, and just existed. There were people around, a couple walking their dog, a kid riding a bike, someone jogging past. Normal life, simple moments, and I watched them, really watched them. There was something about it, something grounding, something real. And for the first time that day, I felt something other than emptiness. Not happiness, not joy, but awareness. I don't want to live like this anymore. The thought came quietly, but it stayed, not dramatic, not urgent, just clear, because breaking doesn't just hurt. Sometimes, it shows you exactly what you can't ignore anymore. I didn't have answers yet. I didn't know what needed to change, or how to change it. But I knew one thing. I couldn't go back to pretending. I sat there until the sky turned dark, until the park emptied, until the world quieted down again. And when I finally stood up, something inside me felt different. Still fragile, still uncertain, but awake. That night, when I walked back into my house, the silence was still there. The same as before. But this time, it didn't feel like something I needed to escape. It felt like something I needed to understand. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't running anymore. I was finally ready to face myself. The morning after I broke in that stairwell didn't feel dramatic. There was no sudden clarity, no overwhelming sense of purpose, no moment where everything made sense. I woke up the same way I always did. Alarm, silence, a few seconds of staring at the ceiling. But something was different. Not outside, inside. For the first time in years, I didn't reach for my phone. That might sound small, but it wasn't, because my phone had always been my escape. The first thing I touched in the morning, the last thing I looked at night. It filled the silence, covered the thoughts, distracted me from me. But that morning, I just lay there, in the quiet, in my own mind, and instead of running from it, I listened. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't peaceful, it was messy, unclear, full of thoughts I didn't know what to do with. But it was real, and for the first time, that mattered more than comfort. I didn't suddenly become a different person that day. I still went to work, still did what I had to do, still moved through my responsibilities. But I started doing something new, something simple, something I had avoided for years. I started noticing, not in a big philosophical way, just small things. The way my coffee actually tasted, the way my shoulders felt tense before meetings, the way I automatically said I'm fine without thinking. And every time I noticed something, I paused, even if just for a second. Is this how I actually feel? At first, the answer was almost always the same. I don't know. And that scared me, because how do you not know how you feel? But then I realized something. You don't lose your feelings overnight. You lose your connection to them, slowly. So instead of trying to fix everything, I just kept noticing. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing looked different from the outside, but inside, something quiet was happening. I started spending more time alone. Not the kind of alone where you feel abandoned, but the kind where you choose it. At first, it felt uncomfortable, like I was sitting with a stranger, because in a way I didn't really know myself anymore. Not beyond the roles I played, the job, the responsibilities, the expectations. So I started asking myself questions, simple ones. What do I actually enjoy? What makes me feel calm? What drains me? And for a while, I didn't have answers, but I kept asking anyway. One evening, I decided not to turn on the TV, not to scroll, not to distract. I made dinner, sat at the table, and just ate. No background noise, no interruptions. And at first, it felt almost quiet. But then something strange happened. I started to feel present, not in a big life-changing way, just there, in that moment. And it hit me how long it had been since I actually felt present in my own life. Everything before had been fast, rushed, automatic. But this was different. That night, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel full either. But I felt something. And that was new. That became my starting point. Not happiness, not transformation, just feeling something again. I also started paying attention to what I was saying yes to. Before, I said yes to everything, plans, invitations, extra work, because saying yes meant staying busy, and staying busy meant not thinking. But now I paused. Do I actually want to do this? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it wasn't. And for the first time, I allowed myself to say no. It felt uncomfortable. At first, like I was doing something wrong, like I was disappointing people. But every time I said no to something that drained me, I felt a little more space open up inside me. Space to breathe, space to think, space to feel. One of the biggest changes, though, was how I started treating myself. Before, I was always pushing, always expecting more, always criticizing. You should be doing better. You should be further ahead. You shouldn't feel like this. But after that night, after everything cracked open, something softened. I started speaking to myself differently. Not perfectly, but intentionally. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay not to have answers. It's okay to take time. And those small shifts started to matter more than I expected. Because the truth is, you can't heal while you're still being hard on yourself. You can't reconnect with yourself if you don't feel safe doing it. And slowly, I started creating that safety, not from the outside, but from within. There were still hard days. Of course there were. Days where the emptiness came back. Days where I felt overwhelmed. Days where I questioned everything. But those days didn't feel the same anymore. Before, they felt like proof that something was wrong with me. Now they felt like part of the process. Like something I could move through, instead of something I had to escape. One afternoon, I found myself back at that same park. The one I had gone to after the stairwell. I sat on the same bench, watched the same kind of people, the same simple moments. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't observing from a distance. I felt connected. Not fully, not completely, but enough to realize something important. I wasn't broken. I had just been disconnected. From myself, from my feelings, from my life. And now, I was finding my way back. Not all at once, not perfectly, but step by step, moment by moment, feeling by feeling. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like progress. Healing didn't arrive like a breakthrough. There was no single morning where I woke up and thought, I'm okay now. It came in quieter ways, in small realizations, in subtle shifts, in moments that didn't look important but changed everything. The hardest part wasn't learning how to feel again. It was deciding what to do with those feelings. Because once you reconnect with yourself, you start seeing things clearly. And clarity doesn't just bring peace. It brings decisions. There were parts of my life that no longer fit me. Not dramatically. Not in a way that screamed this is wrong. But in a way that felt off, misaligned, heavy. And the more I paid attention, the harder it became to ignore. Work was the first place. I noticed it deeply. I had built my identity around it for years. It gave me structure, validation, a sense of worth. But now, when I sat at my desk, something felt different. The urgency wasn't the same. The pressure didn't feel as meaningful. The goals that once excited me now felt empty. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't careless. I still showed up, still did my job well. But inside, I started asking a question I had avoided for years. Is this what I actually want? And for the first time, I didn't push the question away. I sat with it. The answer didn't come immediately, but the discomfort did. Because deep down I knew something. I had built a life based on expectations, not truth. What I should want, what I should achieve, what success was supposed to look like. And now, I wasn't sure if any of it was truly mine. That realization was terrifying. Because if this life wasn't mine, then who was I? The second place I felt it was in my relationships. Not all of them, but some. There were conversations that felt forced, connections that felt one-sided, friendships that existed more out of habit than genuine connection. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. I started noticing how I felt after being around certain people. Drained, disconnected, tired, and others calm, understood, at ease. That difference became impossible to ignore. So I started doing something I had never done before. I created space, not in a dramatic, cutting people off way, but gently, honestly. I stopped forcing conversations, stopped saying yes when I didn't mean it, stopped showing up as a version of myself that wasn't real. And slowly, some people drifted away, not with conflict, not with arguments, just distance. And even though I knew it was necessary, it still hurt. Because letting go of people, even when they're not right for you anymore, still feels like loss. There were nights I questioned myself. Am I isolating myself? Am I pushing people away? Am I making a mistake? But then I would sit with myself in the quiet and feel the difference. Before, I felt lonely even when surrounded by people. Now, I felt alone sometimes but not empty. And that difference mattered. One of the biggest turning points came unexpectedly. It wasn't a big event, not something dramatic, just a conversation. I was sitting with an old friend, someone who had known me for years. We were talking about life, work, everything, and at some point, she said something casually. You've changed. I paused. Is that a bad thing? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know, she said honestly. You're quieter, more distant. That word again, distant. But this time, it didn't feel like criticism. It felt like confirmation. Because I wasn't distant from myself anymore. I was just no longer performing for everyone else. And that meant some people wouldn't recognize me. And that's okay. That night, I went home and sat in the same living room. The same space that once felt empty. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because I wasn't the same. I looked around, at everything I had built. Everything I had held on to. And I realized something deeply. Letting go isn't about losing your life. It's about making space for the right one. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, choice by choice. I didn't quit my job the next day. I didn't rebuild my entire life instantly. But I started making intentional changes, smaller steps, more aligned choices, more honest decisions. I began exploring things I had ignored for years, things that didn't come with pressure or expectations. Reading, walking, sitting in silence without needing to fill it. And in those quiet moments, I started discovering something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity, not about the world, but about myself. Who am I without all the no's? What do I actually want? What matters to me? The answers didn't come quickly, but they started to form, not as loud declarations, but as quiet truths. I want peace. I want meaning. I want a life that feels real, not just looks good. And for the first time, those desires felt more important than anything else. I still had a long way to go. I knew that. Healing isn't linear, growth isn't comfortable, change isn't easy, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't afraid of losing the old version of my life anymore, because I had already lost myself once, and I wasn't willing to do that again. So I kept going, not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly, and for the first time in years, that felt like the right direction. If you walked into my home now, you might not notice anything extraordinary. The furniture is still simple, the walls are still quiet, the rooms still carry that same soft light in the evenings, but something is different, not in what you see, in what you feel. There is no constant noise anymore, no television running just to fill the silence, no background chatter to distract me from my own thoughts, just space, and for the first time in my life, that space doesn't scare me, because it's no longer empty, it's peaceful. That didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a moment where everything suddenly made sense, but there was a moment where everything finally settled. It came on an ordinary day. No special occasion, no big event, just a quiet Sunday morning. I woke up early without an alarm, the kind of early where the world still feels asleep. The light outside was soft, the air was still, and instead of reaching for my phone, instead of rushing into the day, I stayed in bed, just breathing, no heavy thoughts, no overwhelming emotions, no urge to escape, just presence. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't searching anymore. For years, everything in my life had been a search, for success, for validation, for connection, for something, anything that would make me feel complete. But in that moment there was no searching, because I wasn't missing anything. I sat up slowly, walked into the kitchen, made coffee, and even that felt different. Not because the coffee tasted better, but because I was actually there, fully present. No rushing, no distractions, no trying to get to the next thing, just living. I took my coffee to the window, watched the sunlight stretch across the street, watched people begin their day. And for the first time in years, I felt something simple, content, not excited, not overwhelmed with happiness, not chasing a high, just okay. And I can't fully explain how powerful that is until you've spent years feeling like something is missing. Because when you've lived in emptiness, even quiet contentment feels like a miracle. That's when it hit me, not as a thought, but as a deep, steady knowing. I found my way back, not to a perfect life, not to some ideal version of happiness, but to myself. The version of me I had lost somewhere along the way, under expectations, under pressure, under years of pretending everything was fine. I didn't become a completely different person. I became a more honest one. I still have hard days, still have moments of doubt, still feel uncertain sometimes. But the difference now is that I don't run from those feelings. I face them, I sit with them, I understand them, because I know they don't define me. They pass, and I remain. My life looks different now, not dramatically, but meaningfully. I made changes, slow ones, intentional ones. I adjusted my weren't chasing every opportunity, but choosing what aligns with me. I rebuilt my relationships not based on convenience, but on honesty and connection. I created space not for distraction, but for clarity. And in that space, I found something I had never truly had before. Peace, not the kind that comes from everything going right, but the kind that stays even when things don't. Sometimes I think back to that night, the one where I sat on the bathroom floor and whisper, I feel nothing. At the time, it felt like the lowest point of my life, like something was broken beyond repair. But now, I see it differently. That wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning, the moment I stopped pretending, the moment I faced the truth, the moment I finally listened to myself. Because sometimes, you have to feel completely empty, to realize what actually matters. To stop filling your life with things that don't belong. To stop chasing things that don't fulfill you. To stop being someone you're not. And start coming back. If you had met me back then, you would have seen someone who looked like she had everything. But if you meet me now, you'll see someone who finally understands what that actually means. It doesn't mean having more. It doesn't mean achieving more. It doesn't mean being perfect. It means being real. Real in how you live. Real in how you feel. Real in who you are when no one is watching. Because at the end of the day, when the door closes, when the nose fades, when it's just you and your thoughts, that's the life you actually live. And for the first time in I don't feel the need to escape it. I sit in it. I breathe in it. I exist in it. And it feels like home. I used to think emptiness was something to fear. Something to avoid. Something that meant something was wrong with me. But now I understand something deeper. Emptiness isn't the end. It's a signal. A quiet, honest message that something in your life isn't aligned with who you truly are. And if you're brave enough to listen, if you're strong enough to face it, it can lead you somewhere you never expected. Back to yourself. I was 34 years old, sitting on a bathroom floor, feeling like I had nothing left inside me. And somehow that was the moment everything began. Because I didn't stay empty. I learned. I faced it. I walked through it. And on the other side, I didn't find a perfect life. I found a real one. And that is more than enough.